Give me talking movie club. Start things off. So just jump right into it. I watched Marriage Story recently. If you wonder what the movie club movie of the week is, you can always find it in the movie shows club in the Discord. But anyways, Marriage Story was a movie that Netflix produced and released, like a month or something. I mean, it feels like it was kind of recent, but maybe you guys overlooked it because it just didn't seem that interesting. I know I certainly did, but then it got a lot of critical acclaim, and it won an Academy Award or two, or something like that. I don't know. So people started looking into it again. I was already interested in it just because it had two actors that I really enjoyed. So when I also heard that it was actually really good, I was like, okay, let's check it out. Because generally when things are really well liked, it doesn't really matter what the premise is, right? The premise can be really boring and totally unappealing and just outside of anything that would really matter to you. You know, like I'm not someone who's married or has been divorced. But there's usually something pretty good about it. So they're usually worth checking out. That said, I've been disappointed by a lot of things that have been well reviewed before, but now this one was actually pretty good. So if you have Netflix, definitely check out Marriage Story, because my general assessment is that it was a very good movie. In terms of like the technical stuff, the direction and acting and sound and all that stuff, like, you know, was it a well-made movie? Yes, it was, except for a couple of very quick cuts that were a little jarring. Kind of took you out of the moment, just felt a little weird. But as far as a movie that made you feel and left you with a good impression of the movie, it was certainly like a 8 out of 10. Watchability, like replayability. So like you would ever watch it again. Another thing that's pretty important about movies. I don't know if I would. So that score, maybe like a 4 or 5 out of 10. I suppose I would watch it with someone if they're like, oh, I'm really interested in this and I want to watch it. Like, I would watch it and have like a couple of interesting things to note that I probably didn't catch when it first was going through. Because it is a layered story. It's not super simple. In fact, that's what makes it a pretty damn good movie, is that there's a lot of complexity in it. So there is at least one really good rewatch of the movie, but it's not like it gave me any strong feelings or in either direction, either like, you know, strong emotions or I wanted to cry or found it really funny and humorous, or there's no like just, oh, this is on TV, let me just like watch it like a lot of other good movies have. Like we see Jurassic Park on network television and it's just like, okay, we'll watch this, you know, easy choice. Marriage Story doesn't really have that, but it does have at least one really good rewatch in it, because it is a story about two people, and people are supposed to be they're supposed to be interesting to a degree, right? Like I know we all know people that we're not interested in or straight up say are boring. But that's usually just because we see one side of it and we just don't we don't click. We don't see everything, right? A couple of people that I just never have any interesting conversations with, but I'm sure have very deep and fulfilling relationships with other people. And it's all depending on like the movie's directing and writing and acting, whether or not like you actually believe that human is actually layered like an onion. Humans are like onions. Or if it's just flat and unbelievable and more about two people just having these flaws and whatnot, trying to drive the story along, as opposed to the story being driven by their actions and bad decisions and whatnot. And Marriage Story did it very well. So if you don't know the context, so it starts off with two people are married and they're talking about all the good things about each other, and then it very quickly reveals that like, okay, they're getting a divorce. So this whole movie is about their divorce. Hello. And that's like already kind of a grim story, and as I said, like not one that would really appeal to a lot of people. It doesn't hit us, you know, in any particular way if we aren't married or divorced or even in a relationship. Like if you're not any of those three things, then you might be like, "Why am I really going to be interested in this?" I think you would be. I was, and I haven't been any of those three things. So it does a very good job of just showing how a divorce, like two people growing apart, can really be damaging and misconstrued, and you know, you're only seeing the one side of things. Again, like there's layers to everything. So it even starts off with like the woman, the person Scarlett Johansson is playing, is like, she immediately just kind of like explodes and doesn't want to do this like thing that her therapist is suggesting, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, so maybe she's the problem in the marriage. And then it goes to Adam Driver goes to Ben, and in the next scene, and it's now he is the one that you're like, oh wait, is it his fault that the marriage is over? Because it kind of sets up that way that you have, maybe in the beginning you're like, oh yeah, okay, two people, sometimes things just don't work out, we don't necessarily blame anyone. But then it very quickly kind of almost sets up like this easy blame game, even when these two people are trying to be very civil about it, like they don't want to get lawyers involved. But as the movie goes on, the wife goes to California to continue her career in acting, while the guy, who's like this genius director in some like, you know, really stupid plays, but anyways, he's a very good director, stays in New York, and they have a kid, so of course that complicates things. And the woman is convinced by a co-worker to get a lawyer, even though they agreed not to do lawyers. Came at the right time. Yeah, Apollo's being all cuddly. The lawyer, by the way, is the same woman who is the mom in Little Woman. The heroine in Jurassic Park. I keep forgetting her name, but she's like very, very good actress. It's so funny too, because Marriage Story and Little Woman came out like in the same year, around like the same months, I would say. And she plays two completely different characters. In Little Woman, she's a very selfless, wise, motherly type. Laura Dern, that's her name. And in Marriage Story, she's kind of a little bit mean, a little bit evil in some ways, kind of like a stereotypical lawyer, where like they kind of hint at some of like the sleaziness, but then they also do like a decent job of making her also like seeing her perspective. But yeah, she plays like this woman who's, you know, the hotshot Californian lawyer who's dresses really tight clothes and revealing, and always looks like a 10 out of 10 and just gorgeous. Just like such a difference. if you watch Little Woman. But she does a good job. They have Ray Liotta in it as well as like the guy's lawyer he eventually hires. And that's kind of where you see, like, basically every time they talk to a lawyer, both of the main characters are like, yeah, we like, you know, it's kind of a mutual decision. We don't want, you know, I don't hate her, she doesn't hate me. Like, it's all good. And the lawyers are like, no, that's not how it's going to be. That's not what's going to happen. And like, they're right. Like, it is not how it happens. Every time they have to actually debate with each other, there's always little like pinpoints that the lawyers find and of course expand on to make things look really, really bad, just for the interest of like winning the case, right? Like getting more out of the settlement, even though initially they wanted to agree on 50-50 anyways. There is the issue of where the kid would stay, because that's one thing they really couldn't decide on, because she lives in California and he lives in New York. So eventually it gets down and dirty and it gets into divorce lawyers, and it's really gross, you know? But there's a couple of really great scenes that came out of that. Like, during the divorce hearings, she admitted to the guy, like, she had a drink, and she, like, kind of stumbled down the stairs a little bit and jokingly laughed it off and was like, yeah, but my parents were drunk all the time, too. Which he told his lawyer, who brought it up in court to insinuate that she was an alcoholic. And then there's another time where the guy didn't buckle in the child's seat in a car, because he thought the people who installed it did that, but they didn't, and he didn't know that. but they caught it, so it wasn't like a big deal. But she told her lawyer that, and the lawyer used it to insinuate that the guy was not a good dad. They do a good job as well of touching on kind of like the two, like basically the sexism that exists in divorce proceedings. Like, yeah, a lot of these things are set up to protect a woman who is in an unfortunate situation, and they're right about that. They have a little scene where basically the woman lawyer explains the sexism that can happen, how the mom has to be a perfect mom, where something will happen and the dad can get away with a little bit more. And then ditto for the guy and his lawyer, where he's talking to the lawyer, and the lawyer's he uses two lawyers in the movies, but he like explains that like, yeah, it's kind of unfair in this direction as well. And they go on to extrapolate just how men and women get treated during divorce processes, but also about like, you know, child custody, which was interesting. At one point they have this like super passionate argument that really highlighted how good of the actors are. And, you know, obviously in a movie like this, the actors have to be pretty damn good. Yeah, I bet. I actually think this could be a very, like, traumatizing movie for people who have gone through divorces in any sense, or who are a little unhappy in their marriage. Like, I can't really, like, imagine it. So, that's also, I think, it's kind of a downer movie in some ways, and in other ways, it's just one of those, like, it does a good job of evening you out. Just like it shows the bad sides and the good sides of each parent, and just, you know, it evens out to be like, okay, they're just human. It does it the same way with the entire 90-minute movie of like, well, some bad things happen and some good things happen. And I guess I come out of this kind of thinking like, okay. There's actually a couple of pretty funny parts in the movie as well. They snuck in some like good humor in it. So it's not just all like, you know, doom and gloom. It's just a pollywag. Where the judge basically calls out their privilege. Yeah, that was a good moment. Yeah. They touch on a lot of very real things, but entirely in the context of two people going through this, as opposed to, like, making it the point of the movie, right? Like, the point of the movie is not to show how sexism can infiltrate these types of things, or how it affects the child's. No, the entire movie is actually just how it affects these two people. And the one scene that really showed how good of the actors, the actor and actresses, that they had just done like the tough part. They went to the divorce proceedings, and the divorce lawyers yelled at each other basically and pointed out how bad the wife and the husband both are. And they're like, okay, that was really crazy. Like, we need just to talk. Maybe we shouldn't have done lawyers. Which the husband's like, I didn't want to do lawyers, so you should have listened to me. And then the wife is like, okay, well, anyways. And then there's a lot of like really cool ways that they shot this movie. Kind of similar to 12 Angry Men, where there's like really, really long scenes, you know? Like, they probably had a couple of cuts to give the actors the break, but they're done so... I guess, like, you know, they're not like huge cuts, not like one room to the next, something like that, but they're like very small. Like, it actually kind of sometimes looks like one continuous shot that they just, you know, let the actors do their thing for 12 minutes. And they're just like, oh my God, how do they do that? And in this one scene, it's seriously like 12 minutes long. And they go from like, okay, let's have a civil conversation. You know, they're willing to, like, they didn't like how that went down. They want to just figure things out. And then it escalates to the point where they're like yelling at each other, and then it escalates further to actually finally explain what happened in their marriage. Because that's another thing that the movie unravels, as opposed to just like shoves in your face, is what happened in the marriage. And not just like, they don't just like give you a detailed list right from the beginning of what goes wrong. They also they keep it kind of like quote unquote a secret, but then also in a way that is understandable to like how humans actually try and process their feelings. Because very rarely does a human have like an issue and then goes up to the issue, whether it's a person or a mechanical issue or something like that, and immediately have a list of all the things that they want to say and do it correctly, right? We all have shower arguments because we usually fuck up. or we can't articulate our right emotions and what felt wrong about something immediately. We usually have to like talk it out or talk with people or something like that. And that's like, it was a very human way of storytelling, because again, like, I don't like it when movies just like, this is why, and it's kind of boring, but then also it's so much more realistic to what humans would do, that it is primarily the woman who kind of like instigates the divorce. The guy is a little less so upset with the marriage, but he had his own problems, and he's mostly angry about the divorce. But the woman takes a long time to actually articulate why she felt so bad. And, you know, initially both of them are kind of like, oh, it was just, you know, tiny things, like, oh, it was no big deal. Then eventually it blows up into this whole thing where she's saying that he was like a narcissist who controlled her life and let her do her own thing. He lashes out, and in a kind of like comical way, like a sadly comical, realistic way. Again, going back to like how humans usually actually argue in real life. There's no just like amazing speech with no stuttering and no ums and amazing delivery. Like there's that very rarely happens, you know? So the guy like he just like basically starts ranting, and he's just like, I wish you were dead. I wish you got sick and died. I wish you were hit by a car and died. Like it keeps going on and on until he eventually just breaks down and cries. And it's kind of like a little bit of that, like, well, that wasn't exactly the best argument ever. You were clearly going a little crazy there, but that's the point. It's like both of them are going a little crazy and just letting their emotions getting over them. And after he starts crying, it kind of like fizzles out. But what helps is that Adam Driver is like, that's kind of like a really unique thing about just the way he looks, right? He's a great actor, but the way he looks is a little boyish. Like he's kind of a little goofy looking. So it worked really well when he was Ben Solo in Star Wars. When he first unveiled, you know, his face, people were kind of like, what? That's not scary at all. And that's kind of the point. Like, that was a very good reveal, in my opinion. But the same thing for Marriage Story, where he's like trying to be like this angry guy, and he's kind of intimidating because he's tall, and Scarlett Johansson is like 5'2" or something. But then he just like uses his presence to yell wildly like a child and then cry. Because that's a lot of times how it goes. Hello. So there's Emma, but she's still the person he leans on, yeah. There is like a decent amount to really like look into. As I said, the rewatchability of this movie, I would say, is still overall low, but there's at least one really good rewatch where you'd be like, oh, I see. Oh, well, she was actually feeling that, and now I know that. And I think in terms of like symbolism and themes and you know, the very technical side of directing and lighting and all that stuff, I think there's a lot of that in there. You know, like he gets angry with her, wants her to die, and then leans on her, like literally supporting himself through her. I'm sure you could look at the differences of the two cities that they're in. He lives in New York, he lives in California. There's probably something there. I think it's interesting to look into these things, and I did like a couple of film theory classes in high school and college, but it's one of those things where I focus so much less on, because if done correctly, it's the feeling it gives you, right? It's cool if you don't get a strong emotion from something, but then someone goes back and is like, well, look at all these things that they did to try and push that emotion. I don't think it matters. If the emotion isn't pushed onto me, I don't think it actually matters. So what's cooler is when something is like, that really hit me. And then you look back and you see like all these things came together. That's when it's cool to note. But otherwise, I just, you know, watch a movie and wait for things to come to me. Maybe it's different for my parents' coverage, though I still watch it. I honestly can't tell you. It does, as I said, it's like you walk away just kind of like flat on the emotions, because there's emotions that you hate one person, then you hate the other person. You understand one person, then you understand the other person. You hate the outliers, like the side characters, then you kind of understand where they're coming from. You don't like the feeling you get when watching them being super uncomfortable, and then you have some pleasant feelings. Like, it turns you into a neutral emotion by having highs and lows all over the place. So I don't know how that would really... I don't know how that would be in balance depending on your own personal relation to the story in the movie. I have no idea. For me, as just someone who's had, like, friendships and relationships that aren't romantic, I still felt a lot from those scenes where it was like, it was kind of absurd, There was a very, very absurd scene that was kind of one of the comical parts of it, where they get a court-ordered person, I don't know what they're called, to just watch to see how they interact with their kid. And she's like, I recognize her from something. I couldn't quite place it, but she's like this like really amazing character who just like is very quiet and demure and just has no personality whatsoever, and just like literally just like a watcher, and it makes the scene like very uncomfortable. And Adam Driver is just like trying to be the best dad he can be, even though they show a couple of his faults as a parent, but they also show a lot of the faults of the mom too. Both of them have problems as a parent, but he's trying to be a really good dad. And during dinner that he made, his son's like, do the knife thing, and he's like, nope, not gonna do that. And then as like she's about to leave, he's like uncomfortably sitting there with her, just thinking of something to say, I guess. And then he realizes that knife thing might be ominous, so he starts to explain it, and he has a pocket knife that he'll pretend to cut himself by like having the knife out but then pushing it back in so it doesn't actually cut him. So he shows her it, and then he just is like, oh. And he didn't actually, like, retract the knife enough, so it actually cuts him. And then the woman's like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, it's fine. She's like, are you sure you're bleeding? Like, no, it's good. And she's like, okay, well, I guess I'll leave now. And he even, like, tries to cover it up with his sleeve, but then it's still bleeding so much that it comes through. And he, like, hands her her bag, and, like, puts her purse on her shoulder, like, with his bloodied hands. And she's like, oh. It was actually pretty good physical comedy. But also one of the most unbelievable things, but in another way, like, kind of believable. Like, this guy is just obviously so anxious about looking like he's a good parent that he wants to underplay a very real injury. I don't think it worked though, but yeah. Like I said, there's some comedy in it that doesn't just make it like a whole drag to watch. Because I understand when people don't want to watch movies that just drag them down, right? The same reason some people don't want to watch horror movies or anything else. Like, you just don't want to be encompassed by that feeling. And maybe it's a day-to-day thing, and maybe it's a general thing. But I understand where people come from. I'm of the belief that just forever disbarring movies that are sad or critical of human nature or just kind of drag you down. Maybe they have a bit of like an ambivalent, indifferent tone. Maybe they're a little pessimistic, what have you. But any negative emotion, if your goal in life is just to bar that entirely, I think that's bad. But I understand when maybe you don't want to watch a movie that would bog you down. This movie actually did not feel like it bogged me down. It was a little bittersweet, because it's not like they got back together at the end of the movie and some miracle, but it didn't really just drag me down into the depths of how sad this was, Because some movies do that. Some movies just depend entirely on, like, this is sad, it's sad, 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 fucking feel sad. And you're just, like, almost at a certain point, like, offended that they're pushing this emotion on you so much. None of his characters summon idiocracy? Or idiocy? Idiocy? Yeah, idiocy. I think Adam Driver's character was a little less sympathetic than the wife, but I think that might depend a lot on a person per person, like which part of the the couple did worse things. Yeah. Because I found him also a little bit less sympathetic, but that's also, I think, a lot to do with, like, how to say, and this is going into, like, very, like, a lot of details about the movie as well. The wife ends up having the reason to leave, right? So we're kind of watching the attacker and the defender, where the defender never really has a chance to articulate what he could have found wrong. His initial reaction is always to defend. So when they're, like, yelling and screaming at each other, she's like, "You're a narcissist that controlled me and didn't want me to do anything." And she has a couple claims, like, "We said he'd move to California, then he never did, but we moved to Copenhagen for you." And it's like, yeah, she's probably right. But then his defense, and it's just mostly a defense, is like, well, you didn't articulate this well enough. You didn't, how would I know that you really meant it? And you were fine with it until you were, his exact words were like, you were fine with the relationship until you weren't, and then you blamed me. Which I think is a very strong thing to say, because that is a lot of what he would feel it is. Like, he feels personally attacked almost all the time in this movie, because he's the guy that didn't want anything to change. Which is obviously a problem, but one that I think he would eventually, like, if we had a Marriage Story 2, one that he would eventually be like, okay, you know what? She had a couple good points. I need to recognize that. But I also need to recognize that I was unhappy in certain ways, and this is really for the best type thing. But yeah, it felt like he was always on the defensive. And when you're on the defensive, even the best people find it very difficult to actually admit weakness, right? Or really discuss things, even if they are weak, and even if, he really was a gigantic asshole. But the movie does a decent enough job to kind of frame it like, yeah, he might have been in the wrong, but it's not like he was actually a gigantic asshole, in my opinion. Hello, Rifkin. Yeah. I think just in terms of relationships, if you've ever had a relationship, not romantic, just anything, where there's been, you've had an argument with a friend, like this will resonate with almost everyone. The Brock version, I have not. Marriage Goofy.
And I used to defend you. They were absolutely right.
Oh, your best acting is behind you. You're back to being a ham.
You gaslighted. You're a fucking
Things are always
villain.
funnier with
You want to present yourself?
either a goofy voice or a Southern's voice. I mean, it's still very good acting. It's hard to believe that guy was a Marine before he was an actor. Yuck. Hey. Anyways, anything else I want to talk about the movie? I don't think so. The kid was a little annoying. I was actually a lot on the dad's side about how the kid was, being, like, overly coddled by the mom. It was one of those, it was again, one of the smaller parts of the story was about, like, the kid, because really it was about the two people. But there was, like, all these hints that they both had problems with raising their kid, like everyone does. For the husband, he kind of sometimes had a harsh tone with the kid, or, he couldn't really pay attention to the kid as much as he would have liked to, because he was, again, under attack by the divorce, and also he lived back in New York and they had to hang out in California. But for the mom, she was the classic, like, I love my kid so much, and people hate that I love my kid so much, but it's like still like co-sleeping when he's like a 6-year-old or something, and just constantly she rewards him for pooping, which is not like a thing you should really be doing past a certain age. I found that kid kind of annoying. I was glad he wasn't a really big part of it. But I think the whole annoying aspect of a kid is just kind of adds to the stress of the situation. He could have been a more annoying kid. He could have been like fucking Beans from Even Stevens. God, that would have just been unbearable. He was just like a normal kid having annoying kid tendencies. That it was kind of like you almost were drawn in more to the parents' frustration because you're like, oh, and a kid? Oh, God. This is already so stressful. Ugh, Jesus. Very good movie. I would definitely suggest watching it. It does a pretty good job of also hooking you in pretty quickly. There's not like a ton of build-up where you're just like, all right, get to the point. Because I think that can be a problem in some movies. And other people would argue that it's not a problem. You know, there's exposition and stuff that's sometimes just boring, but it's worth the payoff. And I'm like, sure, yeah, but when a movie can start high, get higher, and end on a high note, and never really dip into mediocrity, that's a pretty good movie. Yeah, but again, like I'm kind of on the. He definitely got the unfair part of the deal. Like, he might have been the reason they divorced. He might have been the worst partner in this relationship. But he got an absolutely terrible deal when he was finally forced to work through the divorce, I guess. Having to travel to California. Not being told about, like, the divorce, like, proceedings, right? It was on him not to realize he needed a lawyer in 30 days, but then he also didn't realize he needed a lawyer in California. And he also didn't realize that lawyers, you can't go to this, like, a lawyer can't represent you if they met with the other half of the marriage, even just to talk, even if they weren't hired, which is very understandable. Like, I wouldn't have known both those things. And yeah, you're supposed to read everything in a court document, but I'm guessing the latter wasn't in the documents. It didn't mention casually like, oh, we've met with these people, so don't go to them. So I wouldn't have known that. And then the 30-day thing, because they had gone along the path of let's just talk about this and not use lawyers, I also understand where he's coming from completely when he's like, wait, what? Like, you're gonna legally reprimand me for not knowing about this, even though we agreed no lawyers just a month ago? And that my wife told me, like, you know, you definitely take all the time you need. Lawyers, blah. Well, yeah. The movie does an okay job, I think, making you realize why lawyers are there. So I think it could be very easy to fall into a trap of saying the lawyers were just a bad part of it, that they never should have brought in lawyers, and you know, if only all marriages could just be amicable, divorces rather, and you know, fine. But especially with the position they put this couple in, where she had an acting career in California and he had a directing career in New York, you could really understand where divorce lawyers are a necessity. Like, especially because there's a world where this guy just is like, you know, is told, like, take all the time you need, like, we'll eventually get around to it, and he's just gonna constantly be like, no, I'm directing something, no, I'm directing something, no, I'm directing something, right? Like, the option to just push off all these important decisions was going to be there. So on the one hand, I understand why he was stressed about the lawyers and kind of took his kid on a wild goose chase and wasn't really a good dad that day. But I can also understand why the lawyer was like, yeah, well, 30 days is plenty. Like, fucking get on it. Because the guy did kind of come off like a workaholic. He literally put all the money he ever got back into his theater company, which on one hand is workaholic, on the other hand is just like a really good business owner. Because he used it to pay his staff and all that. Again, like so many like, different parallels are just like, you're like, oh yeah, terrible person. Oh wait, no, he's actually okay. Yeah, she's pretty bad. No wait, actually she's fine. Like, humans. Love the old lawyer. The old lawyer. Yeah. But even, like, say the woman's lawyer wasn't the cutthroat California one that he eventually had to match with Ray Liotta. Say she was as nice as the old man. Then it's almost the same problem as not having a lawyer at all. Like, would they have ever actually forced anything when things need to be forced? You know, like, things need to get... Especially because there's a kid who's going to be stuck between California and New York for, like, a year if things don't fucking get going. Like, if they just told their lawyers, and the lawyers are nice people, and were like, yeah, okay, like, sure, whatever you want, then they're just going to be stuck in limbo, but also paying a fuck ton of money. I mean, suck dogs are better. I'm not so pessimistic. Dogs are pretty good. I tend to like humans. Fortunately, I think I surround myself with likable humans. So, I think I exhausted that. I always go into these thinking like, I'll just quickly do a sum and, you know, and a summary, and then if people have something to say, I'll like comment on that. And then they end up going like into a lot more detail about it. And then, you know, it's been 35, 40 minutes. And definitely the best part is when other people have like strong opinions about something. So, thanks for hanging out, guys. You'll make it really hard to show it. I suppose. How about punch the guy punching C in the airplane? I saw a news report. Oh, thank you, wonderful guy, for 100 bits. I saw like an opinion article on that. I had never actually seen the original article, so I don't even know what it is. The guy was punching the back of a airplane seat because he was angry at the guy in front of him. Like, what? This type of movie I would want to write essays on and get debates about interpretation. Yeah. It's also a movie where I think everyone would be somewhat correct. You know, if someone was like, the guy was at fault, he's a terrible father, and he's a terrible husband, you'd be like, okay, in some ways. And if someone else was like, well, the woman just really was very indecisive, and she clearly didn't want to make the marriage, or she didn't want to make the divorce work, which is like a weird thing to say, but you know what I mean? And you'd be like, yeah, it's kind of right as well. As a woman? Oh, man, how sexist of me. Evil people can be women too, you know? It wasn't the same woman who, like, yelled at the stewardess, was it? On the back, one in front of him. Woman in front of him reclined. In the back, and couldn't recline. Woman in front of him reclined. He started punching the back of her seat. Okay, so the guy was the one instigating. Did they make a big issue out of the fact that it was a woman in the front? Is that why it's... I have been reading more commentary, like, apparently, like, JetBlue or someone, I forget, the CEO was like, He's trying, like, apparently airlines are trying to push this, like, narrative that you have to ask to recline your seat. That it's always been the case that it's polite to ask. When really, before they started literally just cramming in as many people as possible, it used to be totally reasonable to have a reclining seat. Like, it used to be the expected things that everyone would recline their seats when given the chance. But now it's like, oh no, it's just like it's a nice thing that the person lets you recline seats, which is a really, like... I understand that it kind of is nowadays, so I'm not, like, necessarily disagreeing with that, but it's one of those, like, giant billionaire corporations blaming people for decisions they made. And that's not ever very good. Jackets felt pastures instead of airlines. Yeah, exactly. Like, when people put their seat back, is it a little annoying? Is my first instinct to be like, God damn it, yes, for the most part, especially if they like put it all the way back. But then, you know, it's fucking airline. It's a fucking plane, man. Everyone's fucking uncomfortable and just trying to make the best out of it. So I get over it. The worst thing is when, like, airlines have stopped allowing you to tilt screens. I've noticed, or maybe it's been a coincidence, but I feel like 4 years ago, every seat that had a screen, like, could kind of tilt a little bit. And now I feel like I've never tilted in a seat TV in, like, 2 years. And so if someone, like, reclines all the way back, I'm actually kind of, like, looking down. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? At 6'4", I prefer when the person in front of me doesn't recline. But as a 6'4" person, would you love to recline? And when Candy, but you don't do it because you know not to be an asshole. I don't really think it says... I definitely don't think that reclining a seat makes you an asshole. I don't really recline seats because I feel like it almost never helps. There's like one iota of a second where it feels nicer, and then it quickly goes back to just being like, oh, I'm sitting up. It sucks. Got a problem with Zergs? 2-on-1. It's a great build to learn. Aisle seat's best seats. You can stick your leg out. I always get aisle seat because I love being able to stand without having to bother anyone. I once had an argument with someone because he was like, you know, window seat's the best. And it's like, it's okay to have an opinion. But I was having an argument with him because he was like, it's the only way to go. If you don't get window seat, you're dumb. And that's why that's why I say it's an argument, because I was like, what? No, like aisle seats, I prefer aisle seats. But whenever some people are like, no, like, yeah, window seats are best. I'm just like, okay, like, you telling me that you don't actually fucking get up, except for like to go to the bathroom like once? I've been in aisle seats. I'm a very responsible aisle seater as well. I get up often enough that people have plenty of chances without ever bothering me. I'm at the bottom of the middle seat person, but anyways. But I'll do like 5-hour flights, and they'll just like never get up to go to the bathroom. And I'm just like, that can't be healthy. Or just in general, the whole idea that you're supposed to actually stand up like every hour. And people happily go 8 hours not sleeping, which, you know, is kind of excusable. If you can sleep 8 hours on a plane, then that's magic. No, they're just like doing something or occasional naps, and they wake up, they still never get up, and I'm just like, you're gonna get a blood clot and you're gonna die. It's gonna happen. People love to be unhealthy on airplanes, it feels. They choose being unhealthy because I think there's some comfort to it, which I do understand, but I don't personally adhere to. You know, people who intentionally stop drinking water before they go on an airplane because they don't want to get up. Like, I understand it, but it's probably not very good. Their lawn chairs with seats out of the floor. Middle seats are the worst. You know, when I talked to people initially about like some of my longer flights, like to Korea, and I was like, yeah, middle's the best, they all like looked at me like I was crazy, and then I had to explain my reasoning. It's not better than aisle or window, sorry. But if I'm gonna have a middle seat, I'd rather be in the middle line of seats. You know what I'm trying to say. And people like automatically assume that the middle row is bad, and being in the middle of the middle row is bad. But it's actually okay. Because then if one person's sleeping, you just bother the other person, and vice versa. And you still never get bothered to get up as well. Not every 2 hours is normal for urinating. Probably. It's probably a pretty healthy amount. I actually drink so much water when I'm at the computer, sometimes I would go every hour. They had yourself on purpose? Yeah. I'm not about that life. The only things I really... No, never mind. Don't want to do that. There are obviously things I consider when going on an airplane. It's not like I just go in and act like it's a normal passage of time. It's certainly not, but... There's one thing I've always tried to do is be healthy. Especially when I had sciatica. Or my sciatica was not in remission. I banned Hydrated Bot. So annoying. Don't tell me when to drink. 10 to 11 hours? Shit, man, where are you coming in from? Ukraine? Hawaii? Korea? Norway. Wow. I didn't think Norway would be 10 to 11 hours. Bird number 1 million unfairly placed on woman. Is it unfairly placed on woman? I didn't read about any. I didn't read about that. Oh well, obviously, if you get any empty seats whatsoever, it like increases flight pleasurability by like 100%. I don't know how, but I've actually gotten 2 totally open rows of seats in the last like year. When I went to Korea on United, there was very like not many people. I had the entire row to myself. And then when I went to Australia, when I came back from Australia, I think it was, I had an entire row to myself. And I was like, again, it was on United. United's just like usually packed to the brim. And it's not like I was going on some really weird travel day, like Tuesday at noon or something. It was like totally normal, high, like busy times. But I just got lucky. Is the hair new? Yep. As much of an asshole as United is, I am one of those people that just, it's kind of like, I don't have a lot of money, so... I don't have a lot of money, or I don't have a lot of choices. It's like the two things. So United is oftentimes the cheapest, and at this point, I have a lot of miles on United. So I get to always have my carry-on actually in the plane, because I'm in like boarding row 2. And I occasionally get bumped to first class, but like, you know, on like a fucking hour long flight, which isn't really much, but it makes you feel fancy for that hour. Something super stupid cute, yeah. Saying pregnancy is an unfair burden placed on women, isn't it? Am I missing something here? It's not something we can really do much about. Oh, he's a boo-boo-boo. Oh, I saw this actually. I don't mind seeing it again. Oh, he's a boo-boo. Such pretty markings on those cats. Like the silver cats are so pretty. I don't get how sciatica is unfairly placed on women, though. I didn't think it affected women at that drastically higher of a rate. By making men pregnant? Of course there's a manga that talks about that. There's also a manga where Jesus and Buddha are roommates. Which actually sounds amazing. I've only ever known a woman to have sciatica. I'm pretty sure it's not a woman thing. Have I just, like, been totally unaware what I was Googling? Men versus women. Men experience sciatica up to 3 times more than women, so...
Credits received. Thank you for your monetary support.
You're going the opposite way. Thank you very much, Jabo. Not much money either, but I give it so I don't have to fly United. Well, I'm flying United to Poland because that's just how, the fuck are you doing, Cuddle Bunny? Yeah, I only had 2 choices. I had 1 choice, actually. I had 2 choices of flights, but I only had 1 flight carrier. And, you know, now any flight to Europe is like, it's operated by, or it's Lufthansa, but it's operated by United. It's just a fucking United flight. I don't know how they get away with that bullshit sentence. When do you leave? Friday. So for the Australians, they would leave like Thursday our time. Yeah, when you see, like, especially Lufthansa, which is, like, a really well-respected airline and, like, actually quite nice. I went on 1 actual Lufthansa flight from Europe to America, and it was great. Otherwise, it's always been, like, the Lufthansa part is actually the hour trip from Germany to Poland, and it's like, whatever. But yeah, like, I thought I was gonna get a Lufthansa flight, and then I go there, and it's, like, a bunch of United people talking to me, and double-checking my passport, and then it's just a United plane, and I'm just like... I literally Googled what this meant, because I was just so, like, what even is the point? Oh my God. Yeah, I don't think there's any specific reason why sciatica is... There's nothing that you would point to in a body and be like, you're going to have a high risk of sciatica. I'm pretty sure that's not a thing. Apparently, some people do have, like, I don't remember what it was, but they have, like, tighter, like, muscle bands or, like, slightly different, like, hip joint positions. Like, something inside your body that you eventually, like, grow into can sometimes be a higher likelihood of getting sciatica. But, yeah, it seems mostly to do with if you ever have something that directly injures anything around the sciatic nerve. Not something you're born with. Also, I want to say it's 7-ish hours. Okay, that... I mean, I don't know, because sometimes the way the flights go, it can be a little bit different. But generally, the higher you're going... The higher you start to the higher you're going is actually the shorter flight. It's not really, like... It's not horizontal that makes a flight necessarily that long. It's both up and down, and left and right. And I was like, well, Norway is like pretty, and New York is like pretty. They're both pretty up there. It's the best airlines to fly Europe from America. Lufthansa. I'm pretty sure. Emirates, I guess, as well, but that's like so insanely expensive, I don't even consider it. And I actually really liked Turkish Airlines, but Turkish Airlines doesn't go all over Europe. I was very pleasantly surprised at Turkish Airlines. Japanese tapas curry, McDonald's, Japanese bento, teriyaki. Teriyaki chicken and rice. With the 1.21 gigawatts. Yeah, obviously. I'm in keto. Oh my god. I had a friend who was allergic to gluten, and she was a vegan. She was... I had only met her for, like, camp. So I only knew her for, like, a week, but she was very nice. And she was gorgeous and very skinny, but also an extremely nice person. It was a little unfair, actually, you know? And it's like God was like, we give you everything except the ability to eat bread, and we also gave you a really good conscience so you don't eat meat either. And it's like, well, that's her punishment, I guess, for being beautiful and nice and and healthy. All right. The Race Windows Girl Parents, I'm Sorry, John. No. I actually really hate I'm Sorry, John comics. They were amusing the first 3 times I saw them, and now I hate how popular the subreddit got. Well, it's faster to fly west to east. It is. But my point is, like, it's a lot of different things. So, so for instance, here's a good example. If I travel to California and then go to Korea, it's still a 13-hour flight. Even though I just did 5 hours there. It's 13 hours from California, it's 13 hours from Virginia. But if I go to Toronto first, then it's actually a bit shorter, even though Toronto is like Toronto is like right on the same level as me. The longitude. It's a little bit shorter. Patrick kills everyone? Well, that makes sense. He's kind of crazy. Be right back. All right. Did I go to get a cat? No. You know I don't like bothering my cats. Yeah, Ricky Suggs. Let's do some co-op mutation. Here's cats. There's a second cat, but he's barely noticeable. Hello. Fucking hasn't beat the co-op mutation. It must be difficult. Did you check out that guy's YouTube channel? Maybe he has a build. I think I'm feeling a traumatic story. It's just a Japanese bobtail. He has a tail. That's his tail. I didn't want that life. Yeah. Hey. Apollo is a very fashionable cat. And Ziggy literally wears a tuxedo. Okay? My cats are so much more fashionable than Root cats. He's literally a tuxedo cat.